grand opening of the 2016 Ignite Customer Conference, and we are inducting this book, The CERT Guide to Insider's Threat, How to Prevent, Detect, and Respond to Information Technology Crimes, into the cybersecurity canon. And here in the studio, we have the authors of that book, Don Capelli, Randy Trzeciak,
Yes.
all right, and Andy Moore. Thank you guys. Thanks for coming, and congratulations for
Thank
being
you.
inducted into the canon. So let's just start basic first, all right? What's insider threat, and why did you guys write this book? Don, why don't you try for that one?
Well, insider threat, the book is looking at malicious insiders. So we're looking at people who intentionally steal IP from their company, sabotage their company's infrastructure, or sabotage their products or services, or commit fraud. So that's what we looked at. Now, unintentional insiders are also an issue, but the book really focuses on intentional.
And you all started working together at the US CERT, right? That's how you started down this project?
Well, actually, Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, CERT.
Sorry.
Which is not US
Not
CERT.
the US CERT,
That's
sorry.
good to get that clarified.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah.
So yeah, Andy and I started on the original insider threat study we did with the Secret Service back in 2001, and then Randy came on board.
2005.
You published the book in 2012. What's changed? It's 2016. What's changed?
Well, from a research perspective, we've continued to collect cases as the empirical basis for our research, what we've published in terms of models, how the incidents tend to evolve over time. At that point, we had looked at close to 500 or so cases to produce the models. We've continued to collect cases since then. We're very much confirming the models still exist today, how the incidents tend to evolve over time. We're to the point now where we've looked at close to 1,200 incidents, and what we try to do is to raise awareness of what the incidents look like, what some of the observables are, what organizations can do to prevent, detect, and respond to activity. And really we're just trying to provide that foundational data set for organizations to try to build a program to address the threats that originate from inside an organization.
So that's a lot of cases. How do you collect the data? How does that work?
Oh, well, we just look wherever we can. Actually, we find most of our work is in prosecuted cases. So
We
we look
a
at court documents.
real case, a
Yeah,
real legal
they're
case.
real cases, yeah. And we know there's a lot we miss because we do a survey every year that goes out and asks organizations what they're seeing. And that says that a lot of organizations don't report these, they don't prosecute these cases.
Right.
But we focus on the ones that are prosecuted because that has a lot of the best information about the cases.
So organizations are not calling you guys to say, come help us with this? You're just pulling it out of the court cases that are in public view?
Yeah, that's one of the first entry points. If something's reported through the media that identifies a case, we tend to follow it all the way through the court system, the court documents that get released. We're very fortunate being a federally funded research and development center to have liaisons from the FBI and Secret Service, the Postal Inspection Service embedded in our programs. So it's great to have a working relationship with them. They do the investigations, and many times they do provide the cases after investigations. In a number of the studies, we've actually interviewed victim organizations. Don and Andy have been into federal prison to interview convicted
Really?
insiders.
That's kinda neat,
They're
yeah.
allowed to come back out after the fact. So it's a great way to collect information about what's going on around the insider as he or she decides to commit their
I thought you were going to say that you had originally 5 members in your team, and now you only have 3.
Only two were allowed out.
That's right.
But the neat thing is that those patterns that we describe in that book, they don't change.
That's what's fascinating to me by that, right?
Yeah,
Because in the book, you broke it down into 3 kinds of categories, right? IT
Right.
sabotage, fraud, and theft of intellectual property.
Right. And I can say, once I left CERT and went to Rockwell Automation and created a program, I'm happy to say that the patterns hold. And the other thing we always wondered was, do those patterns hold outside of the United States?
Oh.
And that's something that we validated since we wrote the book. We had a meeting with companies that have insider threat programs, and we all looked at these cases from all over the world, and despite cultural issues, legal issues, they still follow those patterns.
Interesting. So I like the gossip, right? Can you guys give examples of these? Like, is there a juicy story about IT sabotage?
Well, that's my favorite,
Okay.
only because it scares me the worst. So there was a case, it's in the book, where there was a software developer in a telecommunications company. and he didn't get the promotion that he thought that he should have gotten. So he went into their main telecommunications protocol, which he had access to because that's what he did, and he put one line of code that said, on a certain date that I will set in the future, just randomly start inserting characters into the telecommunications stream. 6 months later, he got a job. He went in, he set the date for 6 months in the future. So now here it is 1 year since he's put that one line of code in there, and all their customers start calling saying, what's going on? Nothing's working right. What's happening? So that to me is very scary.
So he did it just because he was mad, right? Because he didn't get the promotion, right? And
Yep.
so what you guys offer in the book is ways to identify those individuals, those employees, before they get to that step, right?
Right.
So talk to me about how that emerged. How did you figure that out? Because I'm sure before you did all this, you were going, I don't know how we're going to solve this problem. I know, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, so I mean, you look for not just things you see on the networks, you look for behavioral cues, and you start identifying those behavioral indicators. Now, they don't become indicators until you prove that they actually lead to the threat. We call them precursors before that fact. And as we do more and more research, as we find more and more cases that fit, that identify these as indicators, and we can show that they actually indicate that the crime is about to occur, then we can say, okay, well, these are things we should be looking for, and we can customize our intrusion detection tools to look for these things. Now, what this requires, when you're talking about behavioral precursors, is working closely with other departments within your organization, like HR. And Dawn's had a lot of success within Rockwell Automation working with HR to do exactly that.
So, I mean, I think it's fascinating that we can do that, right? And what I've come to learn after reading your book is that there's not a technical solution for this, at least not a complete technical solution. There's a lot of people and process that we have to develop in order to get on top of this, right? And you guys said you had 31 precursor activities, right? And only 13 of those are actually you can actually monitor on the network. It's really behavioral stuff. Is that?
Yeah, because think of that case that I talked about, the telecommunications case. That guy just did what he did every day.
Yeah.
He was a software developer and he wrote a line of code. No tool is going to say, oh, that's a bad line.
Yeah.
So that's what we found, that really you need to detect those behavioral precursors.
So you set one of these programs up at Rockwell, right? You got buy-in because the CISO, if I understood what you told me, was that he wanted to set up a insider threat program. So what's the first step when you go in and do that? How do you get that going?
Well, so we talked about sabotage, but I started with the low-hanging fruit, which is theft of IP.
Okay.
That's a much easier nut to
figure that out.
crack.
Yeah.
Because what we found in our research was that most of the insiders that steal a company's IP do it as they're walking out the door. So if you can look back and do an audit of people when they're leaving your company, then what we found was most of them do pretty simple things: removable media, email, cloud. They don't do technically sophisticated things. So what we did at Rockwell Automation, I started with a pilot. I got a team that has really critical information, and I got legal to approve that can I do an audit anytime anyone leaves this team. HR
I didn't even
bought
think
it.
of that. I
Yeah.
didn't think you had to get that approved. But
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, because you don't want to have someone sue your company and say, hey, they picked on me because they don't like me. It has to be a policy that's consistently enforced. And then we got HR on board for that team, and we started our pilot. But at the same time, I started training around the world, training our HR mainly. And next thing I knew, an HR person in another part of the company said, hey, I just had 4 people resign, and they started their own company, and I think they might have taken something. Can we do your audit? So I went to legal and said, can I do an audit on that team? And he said, yeah, go ahead. And we found that they had taken thousands of files, that we'd invested millions of dollars and 6 years of Rockwell Automation time in developing. So boom, my pilot was over. It was global.
Now you're and that's what you're talking about being rewarded for. It works.
Yeah,
exactly. It
exactly.
actually works in the industry. That's fantastic. I love that about it, right? So we can, but we can monitor for technical stuff, right? So and some of the things were pretty straightforward in the book, things you could do, right? So how do you set up the non-technical stuff? You're talking about just having HR notice that people are leaving, but is there other things you can do?
Well, what I did was just went around the world, not traveling, but via WebEx.
Yeah.
And just trained our HR staff and managers about these concerning behaviors, because what we found in those sabotage cases was people, we call it insert, they end up on the HR radar. So it gets bad enough that they come to the attention of HR. So we know people have a bad day, people have a bad
Sure.
week. This isn't somebody who is going through something at home and they're having a few bad weeks. This is someone who ends up, the manager goes to HR and says, we need to take some action. So I just trained our HR and our managers to recognize that and not to just fire the person or
Right.
demote the person,
Right.
but contact us. And then we can do forensics and we can do an investigation and make sure that they haven't set something up
So there's
with
stages.
legal approval.
Yeah, of course. 'Cause of course.
Yes.
Okay. Let's just caveat that right now. Okay. So what you're saying then, there are stages of where this person's going to work their way into, well, I'm going to convince myself into doing something like this.
Yeah.
He's not going to do it like tomorrow when because he had a bad day. At least that's the pattern you're saying.
Right.
So we've definitely seen different motivations of individuals who want to cause harm. Certainly the motivations of a saboteur would be revenge against the organization for, and many times, a perceived injustice done to him or her. And that tends to be more of a crime of passion to get revenge against the organization. On their way out the door, they set up and carry out their attack. Different motivations for someone who's stealing intellectual property. That tends to be someone who wants to take the information for a business advantage, to advance their career, to go to a competing organization,
Right.
starting competing organization against the particular organization. And then finally, fraud is different as well. Someone motivated for a financial gain, that they'll take money from the organization, or they'll be paid to change data in a critical system to create some type of unauthorized payment, unauthorized benefit. So if you're really looking to protect a critical asset, the motivation of the employee would be different for revenge or financial gain or some type of business advantage as well. So as you look to these behavioral observables, it would be what might be the exhibitors of saboteurs who would be revenge against the company, someone who'd be under severe financial stress, financial need, and someone who'd be taking information for a business advantage. So different motivations could potentially lead to different impacts against the organization.
So for the three types of insider threat you guys lay out, does one pop up more in the case studies than others? Does one have a higher percentage of happening in the cases you're looking at?
So what we would say is that we caveat our data by these are the prosecuted cases, the ones that are reported, the ones that we can find information on. And we find more cases of fraud because, in our opinion, our hypothesis is that they're required to report these types of data breaches, these types of incidents. As Andy alluded to, a survey we do on a yearly basis, CSO Magazine does a cybercrime survey. We find that about 3 out of every 4 incidents where an insider is involved is handled internally, no legal action, no law enforcement action. So where we find more cases, it tends to be where there is a requirement to report, and that tends to be more of the fraud cases that we have available in our databases.
So it skews it, even though it looks like it's more important, but it's probably not.
But we want to highlight
Yeah.
there's impact, significant impact
yeah.
across all these,
I
absolutely.
see, yeah.
Well, so in 2013, Symantec did a survey and they just went out globally and said, if you left your job in the last year, did you take any confidential corporate information with you? 50% said yes. Half the people walking out of their company are taking confidential corporate information. And 40% of them admitted they plan to use it in their next job. So theft of IP, like at Rockwell Automation, we now have a proactive program that we do these audits before they leave the company. So they're not criminals, they're not prosecuted. We don't have to contact law enforcement. We just talk to them before they leave and get it back.
You just remind them that they shouldn't be doing what
Yes.
yeah, I like that. All right, so in the book you guys lay out 16 mitigation practices. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. And everybody should get this book and look at. This is the manual. I'm telling everybody, all the readership. This is, if you want to develop your program, get the book, all right? Because it's fantastic. All right, but should we do one before the others? Should we start? Is there maybe the first 3 we should begin with? Or you got to do them all, or it won't work?
Personally, when I used the book
Yeah.
when I went to Rockwell Automation.
Sure. You better have, yeah.
I know.
I don't want to read that book. I want to read this other insider threat book.
it was kind of scary, you know, going from Carnegie Mellon, where we told everybody, here's what you should do,
Yeah.
to actually doing it. But, you know, I looked through the book and did exactly that and thought, okay, where do I start? And
Right.
that's why I picked theft of IP, because you have a 50-50 chance the first time you do an audit of catching something. So you have a pretty good chance of having a good return on investment and being able to get buy-in. So that's what I recommend people start with. Just start with that 30 to 90 day period before people leave.
So that's the first one. That's the kind of low-hanging fruit. Okay, I kind of like that egg, and it shows some success.
Right.
And it'll build after that. I like that a
Yes.
lot. All right. So the last question I want to ask you guys is there's how many cases you have now?
Over 1,200.
Over
We're getting close to
1,200.
1,300, yes.
I was just interviewing the FAIR people in here, right? They're talking about how do you analyze risk, okay? And the question I get when I go around and talk to people is, okay, we're afraid of insider threat, but how often is it happening? You alluded to this with how a lot of it's going on that we're not even documenting, but so answer that question. Is it really a thing that we should be put on the top priority list for protecting our organizations?
If you don't, I think you're crazy. Honestly, because that 50-50, when I went to CERT, I started an insider threat information sharing group, and there were maybe 8 people when we started, people that had programs.
Right.
Now we're up to what? CERT took it over because it got so big. How many
About
people do
just
we
close, just short of 200 individuals, 93 different organizations, really coming together on a monthly basis, share challenges, successes, building insider threat programs. Really, other organizations are doing this today, and it's just a great way to share lessons learned and best practices around how to build a program, how to measure the effectiveness of the program, and what if you do catch somebody doing something,
do you
what's
do?
your effective response to that as well.
And everyone is catching people. That's the thing.
That's the thing.
Yes,
And
they are successful.
Are you the only one collecting stats on this? Because is there anywhere else this gets collected somewhere?
Well, there's certainly other organizations that collect and report on insider incidents. We
Yeah.
believe we have the largest database in the world of insider incidents. We use an empirical methodology to develop our models, our patterns. We really want to try to say what these are the things insiders have done. At a minimum, try to stop these things from happening in your organizations rather than speculate on what an insider could do. So we'll continue to use that empirical database to build our models going forward.
Well, it's a fantastic book, and we're out of time, but I just want to say thank you guys for coming and doing this. Congratulations on being inducted into the canon, and just thank you for writing the book because the industry needed it.